Hey everyone, one thing I've realized over time from listening to like news or podcast drama is that one subsect of like the entertainment industry that's very annoying is comedians. People like Ari Shafir, David Portney, the guy behind Barstool Sports, and most particular Bobby Lee. They're all incredibly annoying while being famous for like being really funny to other people, but Bobby Lee in particular, he's up there in the upper echelons for being really painful to listen to his own podcast, in my mind at least. Mainly because in every clip I've seen of him, he has like that energy of that annoying fat kid that no one likes in school, and he has like one shitty saying, and his main way of getting attention from people or just like having pity attention from the teacher is like making very awkward jokes that make people uncomfortable. That part's not so bad. A lot of comedians are like use the same tactic. It's most of the way like how he's never self-aware, like how he's making people uncomfortable. He never stops it just keeps going till like someone wants to leave and he has to like beg them to stay on the podcast.
This was an uncomfortable situation. I really apologize. I worship you. I love you so much. Thank you so much for being here, Bobby.
Right now I'm giving reasons why I personally dislike him before I tear into him later in the video. But in every single episode of his podcast with his friend, where he has like a guest, or he's a guest on another podcast, he uses the exact same tactic of making people feel uneasy. And in those clips, it's only him laughing. Everyone else looks uncomfortable, naturally. It's not that hard, I promise you, to find clips of what I'm talking about. Well, it's very clearly shown. But one infamous example that I have to mention was his appearance on the Imposter podcast all the way back in 2022, which was so bad I would even have to like mention like how awful it went. Like those clips are well known by themselves.
Like if we had a staff of writers, they'd be like, yeah, we'll cut that. But
I'm sorry.
Essentially it was a really good monologue.
Usually when I do my comedy, I don't have writers in the room. I actually write my own stuff.
Okay, I can tell.
Okay, but now, breathe in, breathe out. After that long intro, I'm gonna mention now what I want to talk about in this video today. Because the episode that came out 2 years ago, it's only of recently that Bobby Lee went on George Janko's podcast, which is sort of fun because in that Impulse episode that he was in, Bobby Lee, is also the one that led to the most drama between like George Janko or Logan Paul for them to separate, for him to make his own show, the George Janko show. And you know what? I feel awful for him. Like I knew about the drama between him and Logan Paul and that bootlicker Mike, and I always felt bad for him. Like I was also on his side, but even after you mentioned like most comedians or podcast people always like have the worst names ever for their own show. Like very lazy being like, get the person's name, but show off to them, all done, you have a podcast now. But anyhow, on his own show, Bobby Lee wanted to be a guest to apologize for like the stuff he did in that prior episode 2 years back and say sorry for the way he acted and treated him. Although he doesn't mention it, I don't want to slander him, but I feel like a secondary motive for like appearing on the podcast is to satisfy some of the backlash he's gotten over the years from like other appearances where he was equally as shitty and people hate the way like they made the actual host feel. But I have to give it to him because he went on episode 69. Nice. My main issue with his apology and why I'm painting it in a bad light already from speaking about it is because it feels like very generic Hollywood man apology, where you blame a bunch of like different stuff, like very minute stuff that no one cares about, and blaming that as the root cause of why you acted bad instead of outright admitting being a shitty person.
I just want to break down what happened with the Jake Paul podcast.
Got it.
Okay. So, I usually do podcasts in my ecosystem, right? So it's like, I know the rhythms and I know what I can and can't say.
Like saying shit like that, like rubbing his dick a little bit, like I mainly do stuff like on my own ecosystem, as if like everything else he did with other comedians that are sort of like in his field, he didn't make them uncomfortable, like it was all friendly banter.
People are pretty open to, they know who I am, right? But with you guys, I didn't know, so and also it's a huge platform. So I was like super nervous. So, I tend to get bullyish and out of survival. Okay?
And you looked at the weak calf. I get it, dude.
You're not a weak calf.
No, I get it, dude. I get it, dude. I would do the same thing if I saw him. No, you can't eat him.
Okay.
Stop.
Come on, George, I like you, man, but I have to admit that joke sucks. No, but honestly, apart from that part like did stick out to me because it does make sense. That's the one part I can side with him where if you're on a podcast, odds are it's your first time ever with that person and you don't really know them. That, coupled with the fact like you have a camera in front of you and a mic recording for an hour, it would feel like you're a bit unnatural and uneasy. So I think that bullish attitude he mentioned about having is half true because when you're being uncomfortable, you want to be more on the offensive to seem more confident. But it doesn't really save the fact like, most of his jokes he tells in his attitude are gay and cringe. And I only said it's half true because there are times like he goes on his own podcast, his own domain, and he has guests on them and he still like acts the same way as if he was somewhere else. So there's not really like that big of a change.
How big are your feet?
Why?
What size shoe do you wear?
Yeah,
A
that's not...
6. Why?
A 6?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tiny.
I bet you have long toes.
There's another part that bugs me where like Bobby Lee says like he doesn't remember touching him even though
You suck. First of all, don't touch me.
Yeah.
Do not
Okay,
touch
my
me.
bad, my bad.
Thank you.
All right. So you're gonna fucking smell my dick, and it's not gay.
So here.
I have to grab your head.
But I do have receipts, and I have the clip as well.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah. Oh no, I have receipts. I just didn't want to do that. Wasn't my whole like.
Let's move on from that. If I did. I'm sorry.
And he goes on to say like how he wants to apologize because now George Janko, fast forward now to the present compared to like back then, he's more like how he says it, more of a voice with more traction now.
I mean, I love people. I love podcasting, and I think that you're a voice that people talk about now, and you know what I mean. You're here, and I just apologize. It's like
Thank you, bro.
And that to me at least, I know some very like nitpicky trying to find shit on him and throw it at him, but that really sounded like George Janko is more like, now with a bigger following, he's a bigger threat to Bobby Lee's image for the way Bobby treated him on the Impulsive episode, and now he has to like go back and go to his own show and rectify by apologizing. That is simply the meaning I got from it from the way he said it, and you can definitely argue against it, but I feel like that word voice, and especially when podcasts, when dealing about drama, it's definitely way more in the context of getting someone cancelled, more so than getting like a fan base. George probably didn't say much about it, and there's another part that pisses me off. Like George, like after hearing that, he wants to like shake his hands for like saying thank you in a way, and he leans forward to like reach him, understandably. But Bobby stays in his place like a harem owner, sitting back, relaxing, making no effort to reach him as well, like just not giving a shit. There is a pretty big chunk of this video I have to skip forward because there's like a very, very bizarre mistranslation between the two about like comparing themselves to like the Beatles band members in that Impulsive episode, and it's painful to sit through.
Can I tell you what really, really hurt me though? I ain't Ringo, bro.
You're George Martin.
No, do you know what I'm talking about or not?
No, but with you.
You called me Ringo.
I know. So who are you, George Harrison?
I'm George.
The next part that was important to me is what I felt bad for George apologizing to Bobby for dragging him into the drama all the way back in 2022, and why he made it seem like Bobby was the key reason why he left the Impulsive podcast, or how he would call it, the Jake Paul podcast.
It just felt like I wasn't in a place where the people around me wanted me to succeed. I apologize that you kind of got caught in this whole drama that we were all put into, but I just want to let you know, before, after, and during, I'm a fan of you, man.
I really disliked this part, honestly. It really felt like someone who was on the right very clearly, but then they felt shameful for like between the drama that they wanted to go out and apologize for something wrong they did, which they didn't. When it comes to like the three hosts of the Impulsive podcast, you can definitely argue like the chemistry just wasn't right, where it felt like every episode of the show just felt uncomfortable. That part I understand. The one thing you can't really argue against like was how Bobby was acting and treating George, to the point that it felt very understandable why like George has to stand up and leave. I'm not even kidding. From every clip I could find between like Bobby and a guest on a podcast, not only did it feel like painful and watch, but every time I was always like begging in my head, please just stand up and leave. You have no reason to waste your time with this asshole. However, this is the last part, boys and girls. Well, Bobby talks about the amounts of threats like people want to punch him in the face for the way he's acting on episodes. But despite that, he just doesn't remember what he did to warrant it.
I've gotten a lot of DMs saying that if you try to grab me, I'd break your wrists. Which I don't even remember doing, and I was like kind of I didn't even know what the it was for a while until I went, did I? I don't remember, but took my assistant to look it up, and she's like, I didn't see that.
Legitimately, he must have like some dog shit memory, or he's so tone deaf, he doesn't always make people uncomfortable, even as a joke. I remember seeing this part of the clip and thinking to myself, like, there's a very, subjective line between like how funny it can be, making someone feel uncomfortable and uneasy, but there's definitely like one objective point where you go too far, and the person you're joking with has every reason to like, just stand up and leave. Aside from the awkward laughter people do, that's kind of fake-ish, some people make it so clear on their face that they don't want to be around you. You have to have some really bad Asperger's to not recognize the emotion right there. That last segment made no sense, and this whole clip I've been talking about, that's only like 6 minutes long. The whole episode of the podcast, the George Janko show, that's like an hour long. So if you want to watch 60 uncomfortable minutes of these guys interacting with no chemistry, where it feels like they were forcing you to be together, with like a belt tying them, then go ahead. But if this 6 minutes of this clip, made me this passionate, I probably won't have a good reaction watching the whole thing. I'm sorry.